Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're gonna get started in about 11 minutes. We have an amazing guest again today with Cal Fox joining us. We're gonna be talking about the software-defined weapons, what it takes to secure our next generation weapons. It's gonna be very interesting to look into DevSecOps and all of the components of big security. So stay tuned for another 10, 11 minutes. We're going to get started. If you want to share you here with us today, please put your name in the comment section below so we can highlight you on the screen. Also, if you want to ask a question to Cal, we already have quite a few questions, but if you have a question you want to ask to Cal, make sure you put it into the comment section with a Q so we know it's a question. Stay tuned another 10 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to start in about 7 minutes now. We have a great guest today again, Cal Fox, joining us. We're going to be talking about the software-defined weapons and what it takes to secure those next generation weapons and how to adopt DevSecOps and move at a pace of relevance with in security and all the intricacies of doing that. So it's going to be interesting, real deep dive in security and agility. So stay tuned for another 7 minutes. In the meantime, if you want to share you here, put your name in the comment section. We can highlight you on screen and say hi to you guys. if you have questions, start with a Q in the comment section. So it's a question. We already have quite a few questions from the public on LinkedIn and Twitter, and YouTube. So stay tuned. Next 7 minutes. In the meantime, if you have not registered to the show, do that at inthenickoftime.tv so we can notify you of the next episodes. And finally, if you have not yet taken a look at Learn with Tech, we have launched it about a month and a half ago. We have 50% off for military civilians and veterans, and of course 20% off if you use a coupon Let's Be China. We release video every week, but we have these live Q&A events every 2 weeks as well. Great partnerships coming. The metaverse, the 2D universe, where we're going to be able to walk through a world to be able to see all the innovative technologies coming out of the CNCF and Foundation and all the cloud companies out there. So you have a lot of great engagement content, really things updated every 6 months. In fact, designing this world is going to be a 2D world. If you know the application called Gather Town, it's kind of a 2D view of the world. If you have ideas on design, should we do something with space, Mars, the moon, or just kind of a office floor kind of type design, or outside of buildings, or what style I think would make sense. We're trying to look at the different ideas on how to design this universe. So if you have a few ideas, let us know on LinkedIn or here on the comment section. So stay tuned another 5 minutes and we'll get started. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It seems there's a few issues today with the platform we're using to stream, and you may not have heard any sound during these musics and this opening video. I don't know what's going on, but hopefully they're gonna fix those bugs. That's what happens when you don't have baked-in testing and you don't test your stuff well enough. So either way, I hope you can hear me well. But I know we had some audio issue. If you have issues, sometimes it's good to try on YouTube, LinkedIn. Sometimes because we have too many people from LinkedIn. I think we have about 100 people right on LinkedIn. So it's just good sometimes to try on YouTube. So I put a link here for you guys to follow on YouTube. Again, thanks for joining today. We're gonna have great show on software-defined weapons with Cal Fox. Very excited to have Cal, who is one of the top leader in software in the department. So it's gonna be a very fun discussion. Want to share a few thoughts with you before we get started, and then we'll go straight into the topic. But first, we've launched in the last month and a half. Check out Learn Nick. We have 2 coupon codes right now. 50% off for military civilians and veterans, and 20% for early adopters. We upped it to 2,000 people because we were at the cap. So China is the coupon code you want to use to get 20% off if you're not a military civilian or veteran. We release video every week. In fact, the last video we released such a great success on the Uber hack and we know and what lessons learned we have. We released already 3 days, 4 days after the hack with deep dive and understanding from the hacker standpoint on how they got into Uber. So we try to bring you pretty content. We have partnerships come with great companies to bring hands-on learning, certificates, but also a 2D metaverse with the world that's going to have all of the CNCF companies and products and innovations, announcements, and video content, and really trying to keep with pace and the craziness of the landscape of the CNCF and Kubernetes and all the good stuff. So with this universe, you'll be able to walk through that and have video chats, engage with companies and their sales team, marketing teams, and product teams, and development teams, and be able to see what sticks, what makes sense. We're gonna have live events, of course, different companies there, but it's gonna be a complete customized world. We're gonna call it the cloud native world, which will have a very customized design. So if you have ideas how we should design this world, whether it be in space, whether it should be in a trade show design or a city type with different buildings or in the jungle or whatever you have in mind, love to your feedback. We got quite a few ideas, but there's many different things. And Tom is right on September 30th, 2022. Skynet became aware, so that's happening, and we created a program we call it the same as the movie on purpose. So it's fun. Hello to Kylie and Gerald and the whole team. So if you have issues with the audio, let us know. But try on LinkedIn, try on YouTube. But unfortunately, sometimes StreamYard we're having so much traffic. We became, I believe, the largest DoD show. I think we're passing 1,000 to 1,500 live viewers across platforms on the Nick of Times. So wanted to thank you again for sticking with us and helping us grow and share as much as you can with your friends and colleagues. I think the content we give you access to is bringing a ton of value to not only the defense leadership base, but government employees and pretty much everybody that's interested in helping the nation. So we thank you for that. All right. So if you have not subscribed, of course, do that in the neckofTime.tv. And finally, I'm going to bring in a second our guest, Cal Fox, but I wanted to really give you a little bit of insight as far as what Cal has been doing. It's such an incredible key voice of the DD innovation. Cal Fox is the Chief Software Officer and the technical lead for R&D within the Department of the Air Force Nuclear Weapon Center, ICBM modernization programs. And Cal has delivered tremendous value already, despite being pretty young too. First, he was the first chief software engineer, and he established the first cloud-native DevSecOps nuclear weapon system. And that's been a massive value to make sure we can deploy this capability at pace of relevance and get it done rapidly and with baked-in security and really without having tremendous technical debt for programs that last often 50, 60, 70 years. So it's pretty mind-boggling kind of the work that Cal has been able to put together with the team, and so he's now focused on preparing the DoD for this new concept of the era of software-defined weapons, both partnering with the, of course, government team and industry to improve that agile execution and continuous delivery in these very complex, high assurance and safety critical and nuclear environments. And so Cal has been really tremendous as a source of truth and excitement and getting things done in the department to promote these new concepts. And so we're gonna be able to deep dive today with Cal on the kind of this new concept of software-defined weapons. What does it even mean? So without further ado, I'm gonna bring Cal on screen here now. Welcome, Cal. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing great. Excellent.
Well, so excited to have you. So thanks for joining us. I know it's busy and there's a lot to do. The first thing I always ask the guests to give us a little bit of feedback on journey. Journey is maybe a little bit unique, and it's pretty exciting to see younger teams lead in both as a leader and as a key decision maker and really a forward thinker. So I love to get a little bit of your background in there, and then we'll be able to start digging into the real meat.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick, thank you again for having me on. We've talked about doing this for a bit, so I'm really excited to be here and appreciate everybody on. Just a quick note that today I'm on in just a personal capacity. So that means that everything I say, all my views, etc., are just mine. They don't reflect necessarily the opinion of the Air Force, Duke Weapons Center, or DoD. So that said, where I'm from. So I would kind of say my journey started in my undergrad, which I got in electrical engineering from the University of Wyoming. And I'm starting there because it's kind of this unique school. It's smaller, so go Pokes. But that really introduced me to just how addicting this startup culture can be and how rapid innovation can happen if you kind of have the right mix of desire, talent, and rapidly demonstrate value. So in this small university, we were able to take in a couple of small teams. We started up a tech incubator where we had different Wyoming-based businesses that were interested in kind of exploring the tech scene in the early 2010s. And state of Wyoming came in and provided seed funds for that. We were able to, again, kick off a bunch of small businesses and grow them quite quickly. That was just so much fun for me. After my undergrad, I was picked up by the Air Force in 2010. And the reason why I jumped into that is because the Air Force offered to kind of continue that theme. I was offered a position where I was the first engineer in a brand new workload. And this workload was extending the service life of a bunch of platforms, F-16, F-22, F-35, B-2, et cetera, many others. And we were reverse engineering both hardware and software to help these platforms live on for quite a bit longer than they were intended, in some cases, multiple decades beyond their original design life. And so it was fascinating, again, because we got to grow this very small team. We rapidly were able to take some of these platforms that were really not designed to be maintained as long as they were and provide value back to warfighter right away, turning jets back on service, et cetera, et cetera. Super exciting. And then from there, I was picked up by the Nuclear Weapons Center in 2015. That's where the GBSD program was based out of. At the time, GBSD was absolutely a startup, less than 20 people. And so we were there from the very get-go, where it was basically just a concept on a whiteboard, right after what the DoD calls the AOA, the analysis of alternatives, where we decided, yes, it's been so long since we procured a new nuclear weapon, we're going to go all in and do a total recap of the ground-based leg. And so I had the opportunity of being the first software, cyber, model-based person on the program and able to just lean in with all these national experts that were advising on the program. Through 2015, we had a research contract, MRR, that led us into this race for Milestone B, where we were getting ready to actually go build the system. That's when I was named the first CSE in the Air Force, Chief Software Engineer. Very exciting times because now we're starting to see the system come together and scale. And my latest job actually started in spring this year, in April timeframe. And I'm now the Chief Software Officer inside of what we call Western Development Division. And just really, really quick heritage on that. Western Development Division was the original group that General Schriever put together when ICBMs were originally fielded. And the Air Force has chosen to bring back Western Development because we need to bring that level of innovation again. And just again, to remind everybody, ICBMs were really the source of the start of system engineering as a field. It led to the advent of integrated circuits and microelectronics. So you can imagine these huge shoes that we have to fill. But again, if you look at the way that technology is advancing and this concept that GBSD will need to have a 50+ year service life, again, being that effective peacekeeping deterrent, we need to operate at a cadence that hasn't been seen before inside of traditional programs. So really exciting times now where we're taking in hardware, software innovations to accelerate past what we started in END, and again, working across the rest of the department, bringing those lessons learned together.
And that's kind of very impressive, all you've been able to achieve in such a very short amount of time for programs that those would argue, never be able to get anywhere close to even thinking about these problems. So it's pretty amazing. And for people in the audience, I know there's some issues with StreamYard. It's not me, it's not Cal. Unfortunately, it's a platform. Some people have it, some people don't have it, but for the fix it. That's the beauty of having too many people. You're too many listening to us. I think they can take. So, anyways, let's move to the real me. So Cal, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, right? We kind of you came up to me back as a CSO in the Air Force and Space Force, and we had this idea of we need to spread the knowledge, right, and grow that expertise. And we were kind of the pilot for the whole concept of bringing DevSecOps to a large weapon system, and really came up with this concept of Chief Software Engineer, CSE, right, to be able to programs. What is that? What was the concept around CSE, and what did you find interesting about doing something like this?
Yeah. So kind of what Nick highlighted there, it was this interesting discussion between Dr. Roper, who is the previous acquisition executive inside of Air Force. Nick was a big part of this as well, being CSO, and then other PEOs across the department. And what has happened is the department and the service recognize that we have to do business better, we have to move faster, et cetera. And the ways to look at that are like, how do we be really smart and how we build these new systems and leverage best technology, commercial best practices, and also be that really good steward with industry, where we're open enough with industry that we're able to easily request problems in a way that is easy for industry to understand what we're asking for, and vice versa, build these plans to on-ramp these new technologies. So this sort of battle buddy to program chief engineers was developed. That's what the CSE was intended as, where we would work with chief engineers who have incredible amount of experience on these large platforms. I mean, decades of system engineering experience. They've been through the trenches with what it takes to build large systems and integrate large systems, but they may be a little bit disconnected with modern software technologies, cloud techniques, things like that. So the CSE was meant to be this, again, bridge between this new world of the way that modern systems are built with microsegmentation and all the fun stuff we'll talk about in a minute, but also leveraging that tremendous experience that those chief engineers had. So the CSE was the first one, and it's been a great trial where we've connected, again, the experience that I bring with these new technologies with the program's chief engineer, and then also advising up into the PEO's portfolio in Nuclear Weapons Center, and that connection back to Nick with the CSO team. It's been tremendous.
And so that's what you were kind of the pilot of this, and we're hoping that even bigger, but of course with my leave the government and Dr. Roper also moving on, I think there's kind of a little bit of loss of momentum, but that's what you kept up and you pushed kind of this new engagement with the CSO and then center. And so where you what's interesting there is you're talking in your opening about cyber physical systems. I always wonder what exactly we always use terms that people sometimes think they understand what it means, sometimes they don't. But I'm trying to make sure we understand what you mean by a cyber physical system.
Yeah. So cyber physical, there's a couple definitions floating around there, but for this conversation, let's just say it's an acknowledgement that modern systems are comprised of both hardware and software components, and that these components really need to be networked in some sort of high fidelity manner. And also that these systems, there's a huge desire to have them connect to external stakeholders or supporting systems. So a use case would be something like modern commercial aircraft. But that's
And that's going to help us kind of frame the problem here, because the whole discussion is going to be the new concept of software-defined weapons. And so when you think, that term, right, software-defined weapons, it's interesting, right, because back in the day, people would use software was a negligible aspect of a weapon system, but now the ability to be more agile and really innovate often comes from a software standpoint. Although, of course, the hardware is still very critical, but the ability to innovate rapidly and decouple the hardware and software is so essential. So, what do we mean by software-defined weapons?
sure. I'll start with the why and then the what. So why are we talking about this and where is it coming from? So I like the phrase that's out there that we live in exponential times. If you look at the pace of how fast technology is developing, and then the flip side of that, how fast the situation is changing for the way that these commercial systems or weapon systems operate in, there's a need for us to increase delivery cadence. And so one of the ways that these systems are evolving into is just like all these other software-defined concepts, think about software-defined networking, storage, etc. We're starting to see this greater abstraction from underlying hardware with that software stack. So the big trend now is twofold. One, that we're starting to see, instead of very custom hardware that's only designed for one specific mission, where possible to move away from that and use instead generic compute devices. These are just commercial components, or sometimes mission-specific components for various reasons. But the idea is that they're shared among many platforms, not just for one specific mission. And instead, that utility is uptaked into that software layer. The second piece with software-defined weapons, quickly, we're also seeing this software-driven way of handling the way that we first ideate these weapon systems. Like, what gap are we filling? Taking a look at the technology advancements and how the situations are changing again where these systems operate in, and understanding what is the need and the timeline so that we can build rapid programs. The second is the way that we design, integrate, field, and modernize these systems are also become largely software driven through things like digital engineering techniques, where we're now able to link these communities that had a hard time talking with each other now in a really robust way.
Yeah, no, that's exactly kind of the future is going. I think a lot of people would view this vision initially as something that's not achievable, from a safety national standpoint, and kind of the struggle of the velocity and pace of work and the baked in security, and making this balance to become a thing that works, right? And so you have to really figure out how to do that. And so when you look at the intricacies and challenges, right, of adopting this kind of mindset, what do you think are the biggest barriers, and what have you done to kind of look at ways to overcome that?
Yeah, so it's similar to how DevOps has evolved, where it started out with this idea where we had different communities that were doing their piece of the pie and then moving it over for the next community serially so they would work on it and continue down the chain. Now what we're doing is we're unifying software communities with operator communities, just like software and IT. Now we have software and system engineering, certifiers, security folks, IP protection. Whatever is involved in that delivery chain is now being integrated in these teams using techniques like DevSecOps and digital engineering.
Yeah, and that already kind of changed the kind of complexity. I always struggle, when I would meet with some of the teams, the legacy teams, used to dealing with pretty old school technology stacks, right? Even pre TCP/IP and kind of pre, pre everything, and kind of having to struggle with bringing those teams to the 21st century or even the 20th century times. What do you find to be the biggest enabler? Is it like the engagements you have in terms of learning and educating teams? How do you bring them to the table to have an engagement that works?
Yeah, I would say the aha moment for teams is when they connect that all complex systems will have some sort of learning inherent in the development or operation of that system. And so when you start using these agile DevSecOps techniques, or you're in this software-defined weapon environment where you can allow for change to happen through the life of the system, then that really is just amazing from a certification or utility perspective, because now you're able to gracefully incorporate all that learning in any phase of the program. But again, that's a big shift, because typically in safety critical systems, we spend a whole lot up front, right? We get the design as right as it can be, then we move it on to the builders, and then we move it on to some sort of test and certification organization. Everybody feels comfortable because it's moving kind of one chunk at a time. But as for folks that have been through this, the reality is it's kind of pretty gory, right, on the front lines of integration and certification. Instead, if we're able to chop these mega huge systems down into small incremental pieces, bring that integration and those certification teams in the heat of it, they're able to work directly with those developers and understand what's happening as the system is evolving, so that as they drive to that MVP where they're delivering something, a warfighting utility or a commercial platform, that it's low risk for everybody and closest matched what was originally asked for, or what possibly what the evolved need is.
Yeah, that's exactly spot on. That's it's been the balance, the struggle that teams have been claiming that effectively you can't get there, and you prove them wrong over a few years. That hey, it takes hard work and a lot of engagements and discussions, but you can get there. So effectively, when you look at the adoption of DevSecOps, with critical systems, right? And you look at what's happening with nuclear weapons. Do you think we're in a state now where it is possible for people to be able to really start embracing the DevSecOps concepts?
Yeah, I think it's not only possible, but it is essential for survival. By that, I mean, like, again, going in the trenches of these systems that are so complex now, having to work through all those integration hurdles, and then bringing in this idea that we have to, again, move at a faster pace than has moved before, that we previously have operated on both commercially and in DoD. But we have to do that with zero sacrifice for the system safety, security, or effectiveness of these platforms. Like, nobody wants to sit on an unsafe aircraft, but everybody wants, aircraft that are very cheap to produce to, reduce your airline tickets or whatever your value statement is. So that's where DevSecOps really becomes powerful again, agile and DevSecOps. Like I talked about before, it's linking these communities that are involved in your delivery chain as part of that development process and erasing these communication silos, so we're able to maximize that learning along the way. Okay.
Yeah.
I would also
And
say
it's a special beast. It takes special people to build these weapons. What do you say?
I got a little bit of lag with you, Nick. So I'll just hop on this next piece. How to do it, right? Yes, it's not only desirable, but it's something that everybody should lead into. So just what I've experienced on ways to do this. One of the first things that teams should do is take a look at their system and aggressively partition and simplify that thing as much as possible. But really be practical in the way your information flows are occurring, and just be mindful with your certifiers. What is the smallest possible footprint of the thing that's most critical for you? And extremely well-designed systems, I've seen this in, under 10% of a system architecture in commercial systems and defense systems that host those, very critical or human safety impact kind of signals. That means that it's much cheaper to build, to certify. It's cheaper to modernize later because all that supporting software is now less critical and a little bit more malleable. The other thing that's important to do is to think about the way that these teams are brought in, your certifiers or whoever else is part of that delivery chain. How do they communicate? And I found that, again, there's two modes there that we need to optimize and bring tool-assisted approaches to. One is these communities all typically have a body of evidence of some kind. So in defense cyber, we'll have RMF packages. In the commercial safety world, there's usually like aircraft have a DO 178C standard. Different standards are out there, but they all do basically the same thing. It's deciding what's critical on your system, what needs to be tested, and then how do we prove that we've met that agreement with your certifying official. So once you start to understand all these stakeholders involved, having them start to unify on that body of evidence so that you can perform one test that shows, yes, my system is resilient enough, or whatever your measure is, that's repeatable across these different communities. Now we can start to move really fast. The second piece that's needed, so we talked about body of evidence generation, which can come from DevSecOps and similar tooling. The second thing that's needed is not talked about as much, but I found is just as important, is looking at that process automation. And what happens a lot of time is it'll go through this certification wicket, but because they're largely manual processes, again, both in defense and commercial spaces, that idea of the information package sitting in someone's inbox or on their desk in a lot of cases, that's losing, man days and man centuries across large systems. It's unbelievable. So instead, if we start to bring in more automated workflows, tool processing things, leveraging digital engineering, so when it lands on that certifier's desk, they have enough context to make a decision. Again, we can start to move really fast.
That's kind of what you've been showing, is kind of the return on investment. I think people often realize, what it takes to succeed, but then the benefits of doing so. Sometimes it's literally the difference between being able to get things done in the time frame that you allocated to get done, or just failing at delivering the capability. I've seen tremendous time saved both in the accreditation time, right, and the continuous ATO model, and then on the continuous feedback loop from the warfighters and development teams to be able to make sure that we're not doing things in vacuum, right? And so a lot of people start assuming that because the program like this can last forever, that you're stuck in time, and enabling decoupling, including potentially, right, on the hardware side, right? A lot of people start talking about swappable pieces of the stack, right, on the hardware side, and be able to move sensors or replace compute, right? Bring GPUs, bring the AI ML on top of it. What's your take on the flexibility today of the adoption of the full spectrum of innovations that we see on the commercial side? You look at companies like SpaceX, right? I would argue SpaceX is probably the closest to the most innovative / the most critical capabilities out there, with the volume of launch that they do, and what's going with Starlink and things like this. In fact, my connection right now swapped to Starlink because I had issues, and thanks, so we're having a better capability thanks to Elon Musk. So when you think about stuff, what are the limitations that you see on the culture side of the Air Force, Space Force, or maybe of defense industrial base when it comes to embracing the end-to-end aspect of this?
Yep. So I think right now, across DoD, from my perspective, it's really been this learning mode. We're starting with these digital engineering programs, and it's been pretty impressive with just the capability that these programs provide. So now working with these folks that are used to working a certain way, and again, this applies to both defense and commercial. Once we start bringing in these modern techniques for digital engineering, it starts to open up the possibilities of how folks can interact with their work and interact with their certifiers. It's still a grand experiment, right, of how we can best optimize the use of these tools so that people are able to make those important decisions in a very well-informed and rapid data-driven manner. Once we start to layer on additional techniques like DevSecOps, now we're able to take those design artifacts, link it back in with the development teams, and again, try to keep that data-driven decision-making, rapidly moving down the pipe. I am very encouraged by the way that I've seen both commercial, as far as like air platforms, the different critical infrastructure projects that are out there that are now seeing strong investments again from these digital engineering and DevSecOps techniques. I'm very encouraged by the different vendors that are out there. AFA last week was amazing with the amount of investment we're seeing again from the DE vendors and how intently they're listening to the problems that the different leaders across the Air Force are talking about, new programs. And I'm also very impressed with the way Air Force is starting to lean into DE, not just as something they're admiring, saying, yeah, this is interesting, but something that they're making large investments into and experimenting with how do we do these programs in a way that's safer, that's less risk, and we are able to, again, meet that warfighter you need at the speed of relevancy.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you look back at the adoption on the defense industrial base, another issue I had seen was the kind of the silos within the government standpoint. The test teams, the software assurance, the nuclear assurance stuff, the accreditation teams. Very tough engagements between those silos. Sometimes that's hard by law, right, to separate that work, have no visibility on the process and the how of the assessment, and so that kind of creates almost like shadow IT testing and snowflakes, right? I've seen. What do you think is a good step or next step when it comes to merging, or at least to some degree minimizing the impact, the negative impact of the silos of the deployment?
Yeah. One of the best ways I've found to do some silo busting is to take 2 steps back and remember we're all humans, right? So those folks that are over in that other silo, like boo hiss, they're operating a silo. How dare they? But if you take, even half a mile in their shoes, you realize a couple of things. These teams are typically barely staffed to do the job that they have today in any of these IV&V, cyber assessment. I mean, pick the name of the field that's not just providing product, but is doing some sort of supporting function. They're almost always minimally manned. And then now we're asking them to think like, hey, rethink the way that you do business. That could be pretty tough when you're so busy day to day. So if we have teams that help them understand these are the challenges you have today in your silo and how these techniques and technologies can start to, in a low risk way, make your job easier and bring you into the game, then that's when you start to actually, in my experience, see adoption. So in IV&V, kind of some of the stuff you were pointing at, any safety critical system, what we really don't want to have is this case where we have the producers grading their own homework, e.g. someone that has so much bias from working on the system that they miss something and that we field something that is not safe. So we'll see in DevSecOps, there's definitely some strong ways to integrate these teams in a way that they're not a total silo. One of the most effective approaches I've seen is take that software system production layer and provide it as a complete copy up to the IV&V team so that whenever, and link their IT systems, by the way, so that whenever there's a contribution to the digital engineering models or the software, whatever design artifacts you have, that's immediately replicated to the IV&V team. They're exercising their assessment tools, again, on like every Git push equivalent. And that body of evidence is built on over time, sand on a beach instead of a dump truck. You're able to, again, understand with the team along the way.
Yeah, no doubt. And I guess when I think of all the silos and all the engagements, right? The learning and the talent piece is a key struggle, right? The retention, but also investing in people so they keep understanding what's going on, right? Modern technologies, Kubernetes containers, right? I remember all of antibodies when it came to containers at the beginning of the engagement with the nuclear community and even like the SAP community as a whole. And what would you say if you think of commercial companies, right? We're having a lot of companies in telcos, banks, space, new space companies on the commercial side. They have sometimes the same pushback, right, from employees or from partners. Then the other companies embrace it. Companies like Wind River creating their real-time OS, Kubernetes support, right? And so they kind of both sides of the coin there. What would you say has worked for you to start showing the light and showing the way to people to start embracing those concepts?
Yeah. So sort of back to the silo busting concept. You have to remember that everybody is human that engages in this, right? Everybody that I've encountered, both in the commercial space and the defense space, really are good Americans. They're trying the best that they can to do the job that they have. And so for these communities, when they initially have some suspicion of the new technology, it's driven from something. It's driven that they either don't fully understand the technology, or they see that the adoption of it, maybe someone else on the delivery pipeline may not understand the technology. And so there could be concerns that folks are accepting a risk that they're not even aware of. So to help break that down, I like to bring context to confidence. And so from that, one of my favorite ways to do it is, one, start to show how some of the difficult things that they have in their job are shared across multiple efforts, multiple programs, multiple certification packages, like whatever their unit of work is. It's probably pretty similar across every wave of technology that hits them, very similar problems across that. Once you identify kind of what those core problems are, start to build some low risk, off the critical path demonstrators that you can fail, and it's fine, right? It's a learning experiment. Those demonstrators provides those certifiers who are new to technology, or any other group, again, that's involved in their delivery chain, to kick the tires of this new thing. That's been amazing, because we've seen these folks come in and build new assessment techniques to come up with problems that we had no idea that they had, context things of, it's difficult for them to make a decision because they never get XYZ information, and linking that up with a process engineer that's like, well, we could just automate that and give you that data. And the amount of light bulbs that have gone off with just experiments like that have been tremendous. You have to be an advocate for the folks that are making decisions. Still have you, Nick?
And so when you think of the top cover, right, that's needed, because you said, right, the bottom up works to some degree, but we need the top down, right? And so what I tried to do with Rob and myself, I remember, it was really kind of doing that, right? Going reach out to teams and making sure they understand that this is something we want as a department. So kind of remove the bottlenecks, right? So when you look at bottlenecks, that's the other aspect, right? You can't improve your delivery and your velocity if you don't tackle the bottlenecks. A lot of people end up wasting time on the wrong piece of the puzzle. How do you assess? How do you find those bottlenecks, and how do you prioritize those bottlenecks when you start engaging on? I remember, a lot of different issues came to be when we started embracing platform one, on GBSD. Obviously, very big engagement, a lot of new people being hired, a lot of training, right? Onboarding. So people, people sometimes don't think about taking time to put yourself in the shoes of one of these people, and going through the onboarding process. What does it take to be onboarded? What's a what's the different paperwork requirement? What could you streamline? What could you remove? Right. Then I remember also having to engage with the dev. The tough time with reciprocity. They despite trying to protect us and following our mandates, they would say, well, the bank containers, we can't just use it. We need to reassess them, right? So all these kind of bottlenecks, right, were created. It's almost like this bureaucracy trying to protect itself within itself, right? And so, despite the fact that this was mandated by the government, we found the DIB pushed back a little bit, right? And it took some pushback to say, that makes no sense. We're the one doing the ADOs here, so if we're telling you it's credited, it's not up to you guys to reassess what we already assessed, right? It's an enterprise service. just use it, right? What do you find as a good way to get people to kind of address these bottlenecks?
Yeah. So the first, the best way to find is by doing. So start practicing this stuff. This is a change in mindset for the way we used to build weapon systems, and even the way that, again, commercial safety critical platforms used to be developed. Again, it used to be very sequential, right? The design, the build, then the test and cert. Instead, let's try to do the whole thing, but in small pieces at a time. Maybe not fielding all the way out where it's facing a human, but into at least a lab so that we can start finding what's working and what's not. Once you start to identify some of these bottlenecks, then the next key thing is bring data. Understand why it's a bottleneck and how big of a bottleneck it is. And for us, the reason why some of these modern programs have been so successful with adopting these new techniques is we were able to show that it's not just a program-specific challenge with an individual, but instead it's a macro problem that impacts multiple programs. It's something that is really a big deal that as an organization that we're going to have to take a look at. And we brought in those various platforms that had the same challenge set. We're able to bring them together, coalition of the willing style. We all brought data, and we demonstrated, hey, we are able to remove this impediment, and here's our idea how. Here's some demonstration data to show that it works and that it actually improves this attribute you're looking for, safety, security, effectiveness. We've had tremendous success from senior leadership being excited by that. So again, I just encourage teams to be really entrepreneurial in this and always have that decision maker advocacy. So identify your bottlenecks by doing, and then bring your data, look at programs or platforms that have similar challenges and band together to show your leadership that, yeah, we can, doing this one or two thing different, we can change it in a significant way.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sorry I've muted myself because of the issue that I keep pinging in and out. The StreamYard is not able to handle two people at the same time. So thank God we don't have like 10 people like last time with the dual engineering team. It was a lot of people. So anyway, so we dug into the critical weapon side. Now I'm gonna push you back a little bit in time, and we're gonna talk about what you've done with the GBSD specifically, and you're the CC, the first one, right? So when you think of a program, obviously we can get into any classified stuff, but yeah, that's always tough when it comes to programs like this. I know, but if you were to keep it, of course, on the unclass side, when you thinking back of all the success, right? I love to highlight the fact that you got it done, and you were able to move the needle, and most people would have argued that it was never going to happen, and so and if you want to share some of the lessons learned, or the impediments that still happen, or still kind of slow you down, would be great.
Yeah. CSE, it was quite a ride. I would definitely say it's got to be one of the best jobs ever. You think about the mission, right? I came into this thing, it was a startup culture, under 20 people. And at the time, I was Lieutenant Colonel Bartolome, brought me into the program, now General Select Bartolome. But he laid down this grand challenge, right, that appeals to any engineer. He said something along the lines of, hey, do you want to solve the greatest engineering challenges of your generation? Yeah, sign me up, let's do it. And as I got brought into the Nuke Center, I learned about the mission, about what we have to do, where it provides, again, foundational nuclear deterrence and ultimately global stability. And if you look at, there's some great charts out there that show armed conflict over the past several decades, and how really there has not been a significant major conflict because, again, the peacekeeping ability of nuclear deterrence, it's really pretty awe-inspiring. And so the point of this program was to do that, again, for the next 50 plus years. Amazing. And so what I did is I was able to very early on show that, look, we have to operate with the long game in mind, right? That was very clear leadership intent and global strength intent. We were able to bring in national experts. We had great support from Software Engineering Institute, MITRE, several commercial partners. And we looked at, this is a greenfield weapon system. So what technologies are going to be low risk for us to adopt by the time that we're going to our fielding date. And we got some really strong industry feedback from both our Boeing and Northrop teams at the time to really go all in with this, that yes, cloud, DevSecOps, et cetera, were not only at a point that it was ready for adoption, but it was critical for a program like Sentinel, for like GBSD to press forward. So things that we were able to accomplish, I'm most proud about the coalition that was formed, not just from the things from Nuke Center, but how we sort of have seen this resurgence in software development in the Air Force, where we've seen things like Platform One emerge. We've seen all of the adoption of DevSecOps and leaning in of cloud. And it's not just big acquisitions. We're starting to see sustainment platforms from sustainment groups just banding together and saying, this is a better way of doing business. And for the same amount of resources, warfighter, we can deliver you more value. Sentinel GBSD was a way that we were able to start some of those conversations, but it's catching fire across the Air Force. And that's really the thing I'm the proudest about is we were able to push a little bit, but now the ball is rolling and we're starting to see broad adoption.
It's more than just a little bit. I think I would argue that the schedule of GBSD would not have been on point without kind of all the changes you guys have been able to implement. Both things of the engagement with Notebook and the cloud one expenses, work on the SAP cloud and the platform one work, right? And of course, it's still a massive lift. And in fact, we have a good friend here today. Derek is here, EO right from Space Camp. We're gonna have to have him on the show so he can tell us a little of his story, because he's also achieved a lot with very limited access to funding, and he had a question for you that I think would be a good time to look to, which was looking back of the Commonwealth law. Do you see a path to organizational change in acquisition contracted to better support the team? Are we still struggling when it comes to acquisition with all this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I'm excited about is the AAF, the Adaptive Acquisition Framework, and the encouragement it is, how it's encouraging PEOs and senior material leaders to rethink their acquisition strategies. To again, let's break down these giga-huge programs into smaller bite-sized pieces, and then be really smart with how we partner with warfighter and industry to acquire and deploy these technologies. We're starting to see this breakdown from you only get one shot every decade or so to do one big program, to now seeing continual evolution. And then that brings us into your Conway Law comment, starting to see teams align around delivering around value. So instead of having, system engineering gets X dollars, software gets X dollars, they're not incentivized to meet with each other. Instead, we're seeing these contracts that incentivize delivery of things. So attaching a work fee and other techniques like that, which then greatly incentivizes the team to work together, because that's the low risk way to get product out the door.
And that's that's more incremental, and it's always a bloated contracts, right? It's a bigger word, and in fact, if you look at BSD, right, the fact that we only had one bidder, it's pretty scary, right? Government being in a situation where effectively you're asking of a company so much that only one company can give you and to end up, of course they're gonna have a bunch of subs and different engagements, but the fact is you're completely dependent on this one company, and that's just interesting. But it's something you would probably not see on the commercial side. They would cut it into pieces, and you would find the best company for the software, or even software would maybe cut into multiple pieces. It wouldn't be just one world, and that's kind of the bureaucracy and complexity of protest and the nightmare of acquisition is has taught people, right, to do this big massive acquisition event, right, for many years, and then try to find incentives and to find mechanisms within the contract, and then there's all the issue of IP and kind of metrics, right, to see the quality is there, to see. I've seen teams, right, where at some time F-35 had 50% defects on the software release. So at 4,000 developers, you have 2,000 developers literally useless. and the government is still paying for that cost. It's just the wrong way of business. I remember at FEMA, they had $1 billion contract with some, Prime, and they would actually pay Prime to fix the bugs they created, right? So you would have bugs on purpose almost. At the very least, there was no eagerness to remove the bugs from the process, and they would be spending at least 50% of the funding of the entire team on fixing bugs, instead of just building good software lifecycle best practices with the SecOps. So other questions for you here, and of course, if you can't, we know that sometimes you just we have to make sure that China does not get any insight of all the good stuff we're doing here. But um, Key was asking here, what do you see the greatest barrier to advance the digital engineering Sentinel that's slowing you down?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question, but I think an even better question is really across the department, because I would say these programs, it's very rare to have a problem that's just so zoned in that that particular problem is only for that program. So again, zooming out all the way, advancing digital engineering is a couple of things. One is it's becoming more savvy with how we interact with our IT teams. We've all seen the hashtag fix my laptop kind of phrases out there. And there is definitely programs that are operating effectively doing digital engineering with the resources that are out there today. So working with these partners, PEO Weapons has some amazing work that's going on. There are Nuke Center programs that have amazing work that's going on. Army Futures has amazing work that's going on. And then on the commercial side, same thing. There's wonderful investments and advancements that are going on with the technology that's in place and the networks that are in place today. So understand where those centers are and then continue to partner with them as you plan your strategy. The second thing that's really needed is understand intent of transformation. So when you're adopting something big and new, like digital engineering, you're talking about potentially upsetting the apple cart on the way that you built things previously. Do that in an agile manner. Like take it and break it into small pieces, and then have intention with what you adopt. And make sure, this is kind of going back to your point, Kelly, you need to make sure that you don't try to just jump and consume the entire transformation in one go, because it's going to be too much work in progress. Instead, understand where your pain points are and bring intention to transformation. That's something that I think a lot of programs, they get pretty excited about new technologies and techniques, but we need to bring intention and measure what the way transformation is happening so that we know we're spending the time and dollars in the most effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think back of did we be 4 years ago? I guess 4 years ago. What would you say was the biggest wins? If you have to summarize the top 3 wins of the last years since we met, what would that be?
So one, back on the IT thing, the advancements that we've seen, particularly in DoD IT and how we have the agreements to connect the various networks together with various desktops, driving to that cloud infrastructure, it's the thing that's real now, and it wasn't 4 years ago. And that is really one of the key things to open up, bringing in your mission partners to work directly on the data that you're developing along with your government team and stakeholders. So that was amazing to see just the intent and investment from both, again, the commercial side and also DoD to make those networks happen. Number 2, I love the coalition. I talked about this before, but I love the coalition and groundswell that we're seeing from these teams across Air Force and really broader DoD. It's a different Air Force than 4 or 5 years ago. And now it is becoming more software focused. Leaders are now talking about these software techniques, even at the most senior level. And they're starting to talk with real understanding of what the technologies are and how to do adoption. And so it's amazing, again, just to see that change, and the intent of the change is wonderful. And then number 3, I'll just touch really quickly on open source software. So it wasn't that long ago, I would say like 5 years ago or so, where open source was something that was very challenging for DoD, Air Force, and others to talk about in secure applications. And I've really seen that barrier start to shift, where this desire to have visibility and transparency as long as you understand what it means when you consume open source software, that there's investment involved with it, that's starting to be embraced by more programs. And I'm incredibly encouraged by that because it offers both commercial industry and DoD more of an opportunity to contribute upstream and ensure that that supply chain is truly secure end to end, from original author all the way to end weapon system.
Yeah, that's very important, no doubt. So we have a few more questions. I'm picking. All right. So, Mir was asking, you were talking about, how to advocate and kind of help, industry and the government embrace these ideas, right? So, how would you say someone can come and help, right? Obviously, how do they communicate? What kind of tools do they use to do that? Do you see people sharing contents? Is there a case people go to do to engage in some type of community of practice, or how do they engage with you guys?
Yeah. So this is an area where we're definitely learning, both on the commercial side and on the defense side, of how to do better here. I think step one is, with the relationships that you have today, be very entrepreneurial. Like, understand where your current customers or vendors are, and have these frank conversations of what's going well and where you'd like to go, and start to work out a path on how to get there. Start to listen towards other workloads that are doing similar things, and then gravitate into these kind of collector working groups. So some key ones to look at: Air Force has a digital campaign, AFMC digital campaign. That has a good collection of professionals that sit on that call, and good resources to network out and see all the other sub-working groups that are on there. DoD Software Modernization Forum, partially run by Rob Vietmeier and DoD CIO Shop. That is another excellent forum to get plugged into. There's a series of these that are out there that are really, really good to get connected to. One thing I'm happy to offer up is, if there's any sort of topic-specific things you'd like to get more plugged into, I can help with also, again, back to our Nuke Center PA and other teams. We can help you get connected with those resources if you're trying to just find out where should we go next. I would say entrepreneurship, being patient, listening, and just kind of learning with us is really the key.
When people go nowadays to, back in the day, I built the software that they have the mail website where we put all the publications and all the documentation, and companies could go and see kind of that public content, right? Where people go now to see what's in your head in terms of like architecture and designs, and and if you have to summarize maybe to all these companies here that have, obviously everyone wants to study something, right? That's why they are joining the show. But if you look at real problems you're facing, right? What would you say are the biggest challenges when it comes to the tech piece now? That products, or not a specific company, but more the technical challenge, right? That you're facing, that maybe someone could help you. I don't know, identity management for NP accounts, or baked in creator layer, zero trust, on the edge. I don't know what is kind of the stuff that keeps you up at night a little bit.
Yeah. So a couple ones that are kind of themes. We've touched on it a few times, but all the ways that digital engineering can help us start to accelerate this delivery path with a specific focus or certification. So I'm excited about this push to start to use standards-based approaches like DO 178C and similar. Now the tricky bit is, how do we really establish that consistent way of talking about risk or risk exposure in a way that a cyber person, a safety person, a program protection person can all kind of buy into and agree. So the DE vendors have done some good inroads to get started on it, but there's definitely it's an area of development, right, across vendors and across program teams, of what information do we need and how do we make it easily accessible in the format and context needed to make decisions. Inside of systems, hardware in the loop is still something that is a bit challenging. There's a lot of investment that we've seen in IT systems, just traditional IT systems. But going back to cyber physical and this idea that we have software and physical components. We're starting to see more maturity here in demonstrator projects where how you apply GitOps techniques to something that includes a board in the loop or a system in the loop. But there's definitely more experimentation and learning that's needed here. It's challenging when you hand off between your CI/CD to unit under test. It's difficult to return results. It's difficult to have multiple labs integrate up to system test and have context remain. So that would be another kind of focus area. And I think number 3, identity management is something that, in even zooming out from that a bit, even just pure data strategies and data management, including identity, is something that we're still sort of working on across the department. There's efforts like UDL that are great. There's efforts like ICAM. But that area is rich for having folks come in and working with the different PEOs that are out there in their specific mission areas to start to help them define data strategies, identity strategies, and taking advantage of all these great data collectors that these systems are starting to embed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael was talking about how instrumental was enrolled the former Undersecretary for Acquisition and Sustainment, both in the sub pathway and some of the work that's been done in the Air Force. Obviously, we've seen adoption from quite a few teams, but it's true that the momentum sometimes feel like it's struggling. But anyway, so here we have a question. So Ian was asking, how does a defined data picture in the world of Elixir and UDL and like good stuff impact data at weapon system and software-defined weapon system?
Yeah,
good question.
That's a great one. That is a great one. So I'm going to introduce another new term. So I got to find this report, but if you Google software-defined warfare, this is where this really starts to get key. And it's the idea of, okay, let's not talk about a single system, but now system of systems style, how we think about the future fight. There's a software-driven component of that. And so to make that work, we need to have data that is universally understood, ubiquitous access, and things like that. That's where driving down to data standardization, data architectures that are consumable across different performers and different systems is key. And yeah, UDL is a great initial effort. ABMS is a great initial effort. JADC2 as well, as we start to think about how do we make everything talk to everything.
Yeah. And have you had engagements in your role with the kind of UDL, big data, SL side of the house? Is there engagement on the data side?
So outside of just my role, like just general demand signals from Air Force, and you'll hear it echoed again at AFA. This is an area of close industry partnership to figure out how we do these modern architectures. It is not a solved problem, but there's a lot of encouraging experiments that have happened in ABMS and similar. So yeah, I mean, department is leaning into this. I know commercial industry is leaning into this, and then all the way out to commercial systems. They're leaning into it as well.
Yeah. And we have another good friend here that you know pretty well, yes. Dianic. He's here, also instrumental in the adoption of DevSecOps and agility and removing the bottlenecks of the department. So he had a question for you. So I have no choice but to share it with you. So how will budget restrictions and cut off money impact DevSecOps adoption, and how that be addressed? And I'm happy to also give my insight after you're done talking.
Yes. So I talked about before, like the reason why everything is trending towards software-defined weapons and this ability to have Plato through the entire life of a program is to take advantage of the learning that happens both in development and operations. Once we start to lose budget stability, then the ability for us to capitalize on that learning really is diminished. So if we end up with this rigorous requirements engineering process where we can only patch, not modernize, like happens to a lot of systems today under what's called sustainment funding or 3400. If we budget for a certain amount of change rate and those dollars are hoovered off for other activities, which has happened to other programs that have gone through MVPs, it really makes it challenging for this continuous evolution to be something that's gracefully done, especially when you have agreements with your warfighting owner, your warfighting command. The last thing I'll mention on this, so one specific one, BA8 is, for folks that are tracking it, it was intended as a pathfinder to look at how can we extend the use of 3600 type money or research type money to more applications and perhaps have it run longer for programs. So that's something that there's several experiments going on today with BA8, but today we don't know what the next step is past BA8. So again, Mr. Dianic, this is a great question and something that I know ANS is looking closely at. How do we continue this R&D type activity throughout the life of the program? And then over to you, Nick.
And the cutoff one has been always interesting to me, right? That really doesn't exist on the commercial side, and the silos of trying to flatten kind of the software realm into a single code money, so they sustain if software ever done, it kind of makes sense. But you wonder why would you do that also on the hardware side, right? Because if you start embracing CAL and modular approaches, right? The fact is, if hardware may lease it at the program with the IC, been the option of the Amazon Snowballs, and Amazon has been smart enough to lease it as a model, and so agencies could pay per month, per year, and swap it every 6 months, every year, get new compute, send it back, be able to put back data and bring it back and get new hardware, new compute, or modern capabilities. Right? That's that model of this cattle mindset of flexibility is would be able by having more flexibility when it comes to removing the wall between O&M and sustainment and R&D. And it's just interesting. What you put the line in R&D in 2022, if software is never done and it's continuously innovating and continuously changing, is everything R&D, and that's why they put the BA8 to the R&D 3600 cut of money, because they felt, okay, that makes sense, it's R&D, but then you can post assuming that R&D can go to product, and that's not good, right? They put a wall between the development side and the production, be safety / compliant aspect things. So it's just it's interesting. So let's see what else we got for you here. How many questions? I'm not gonna try to pronounce his first name. I'm sorry, but, I don't want to butcher it. But you talked about automating all the things, which is obviously obvious in the commercial world. There's a new full classification that then be show and tell advances in the world.
Yeah. So automate all the things. Once teams understand what automation brings, they typically will give you a huge bear hug. Right? They love it once they get it. The key is to help them understand that their core values, their mission is maintained. So some of these teams have a very strong independence requirement. Going back to the shouldn't grade your own homework discussion, you have to show these teams how they're able to take all of the things that are important to them, whether it's maintaining very strong technical or managerial independence, the way that they separate themselves from the design thinking, that you could still preserve that using automation, that you're not essentially giving them another turn the crank to pop out a certification result, but instead you're providing them a way to be more connected with the design data as the system is evolving along the way and keeping them more connected with that design process. Once the certification teams start to realize that yes, you can accommodate all of their unique attributes, that whatever their community asks them to do, you can accommodate that. They have been very strong in embracing it. And then last part of your question here, to have them realize that, show and tell has really been my go-to, especially if you can put it in terms that are very familiar to them. If you could show them familiar pain points and give them practical hands-on examples of ways that they can work on it and improve their job and their output, they have typically loved it. Particularly if you can give them hands-on time that's less supervised. so that they have their own opportunity to kick the tires, experiment, and then ask questions back.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know people always ask me, where do you put the line in automating things? And, and I always tell them, reflex automation if you're asking the question, you need to automate it, right? What's your take on what needs to be automated? What is just overkill?
Yeah. Okay, so kind of like the top down. If you find yourself, you're doing something a lot, you're repeating something, that is a prime candidate, because typically machines can not only do it more cheaply, but they can do it more accurately, which means that it'll happen way more often. That's all good things. As you start to get into the kind of more complicated things, having some sort of policy enforcement, computers are typically pretty good at that. So think of this for like linters. You can put in rule sets from your certification standards that say, hey, make sure that this type of behavior isn't in my code base or isn't in my emerging system. Going all the way up into the architectural considerations, this is where there is some interesting investments happening in AI/ML work of going beyond just normal policy checks, but now starting to look at, is the system really built in an optimal way? But today that is almost exclusively humans with just a little bit of tool assistance. So again, like look at how often you perform the task, think about how repetitive the task is, things that are really high and right on that, probably a low investment needed to automate it, and that'll help everything else go a lot faster and help your humans to focus on those harder, more abstract challenges.
Yeah, and so we have a question from Michael. I don't know the acronym, so I'm not sure, but will BDD be establishing, publishing, and opening industry future year capability set, visions, priorities, begin dialogue with industry and academia and DOE organizations?
Yeah. So WDD is Western Development Division, and Michael, I'll say that there'll be,
too many
I'll say
acronyms.
there'll be
need
Nuke
to
Center.
stop acronyms.
Sorry, had a bit of echo. I'll say there'll be additional Nuke Center feedback on this one, and we'll let everybody know as soon as we're able to.
Yeah, that's always good. Right? I know it's always tough for government teams to start engaging. I know with Platform One, we kind of push the needle a little bit with engagements, industry days, and live events, and a lot of people on the acquisition community struggle with this. I always invite acquisition teams to be more open and have better dialogue with industry. And I know people get scared of it pretty quick, but I think it's so important, right, to get the momentum and too often I see bids coming out with very little insight, and then the engagement is pretty poor, and you don't get the best read, and you lost the. I mean, you get the bigs will bid, right, but you're not gonna get the non-traditionals and the people that think a little bit outside box, and I think it's so important for industry to understand what's going on, right? Let's see, other question here. Michael was talking about, and I don't know too much about this conference, but maybe you can share a little bit if you know. But kudos on the CCTI D conference in August for emerging Sentinel capability needs in support of GBSD. Have you considered an industry day? I guess it's kind of they all try and get you to an industry day. I think you have a sign here that really you don't have a choice. You have to do something. I don't know.
There you go. Well, again, thanks for the shout out for the DE conference. It was a great time. I'm hoping we can do another one. As far as the RFP and all that, again, there'll be more information coming out from Nuke Center.
Good. And I guess you had organized this in August. Is that what this was, the conference? Can you give a little bit of insight of what that was?
Sure,
I haven't
sure.
heard of it.
Yeah, so this was the first conference held by the Ogden campus team of CCTI, which is Catalyst Campus. And they're a nonprofit that is meant to help industry and government with tech transfer. So it's helping the government, be more articulate in the way that we ask for help. And it's linking industry with those teams to help them understand how to make that connection and, again, unify the problem owners with the problem solvers. So the DE conference was it was meant to bring in just this wide range of partners from both the program owner side, government folks, and the problem solver side from the different DE community that's out there. And it was great. It was, I think we had something like 350, 450 people, something like that. A series of speaker tracks. But yeah, definitely enjoyed it.
I don't know, I missed that one. I must be living in Cape or something. Anyway, that's good. So a lot of people obviously asking things around software building material. So I'm going to bring one to you. Philly was asking, what do you envision for the DAF software building material? For how much are you, paying attention to kind of all the phases of the material when it comes to neutrality and all the accreditation nightmare? Obviously, SBOM is so important, right? So, what's the vision?
Yes. So very interested in SBOM, and I'm also very interested in SBOM not being misunderstood and abused as well. So it provides this amazing capability to start to understand with more granularity of kind of what's happening in your system, and that especially the production side of the system of what really is going on. But it's also really important that we engage early now with the policy makers so that they know the impacts of this guidance that's starting to come out. Again, the enthusiasm is great, but working through the different advising groups that are starting to form up. Again, the software modernization group underneath Rob Dittmer is looking at this. DCIO is definitely continuing to work on things like playbooks to help folks understand how to consume SBOM. And what I think is really important is that this doesn't come out as like this blunt force cyber tool, right? But instead, it is part of the toolbox to understand what is in your system. If you combine this with the bigger discussions of what have I mitigated today, what am I exposed to, and then drive to what investment should I prioritize in making my system more secure, more resilient. And that's kind of where SBOM is a wonderful tool. Again, not a bludgeoning tool.
Yeah, and do you see consensus when it comes to adoption and people partnering to engage on the SBOM adoption? Have you had the interested discussion with some open source teams?
Yeah, open source community has been leaning into this. So SIG-CNF, the OSS team, Linux Foundation group, they've all been heavily leaning in on this. The open source security vendors have been leaning in on this. CI/CD providers have been leaning in. Where we're seeing less adoption is more of the COTS tools that they're more of maybe a system engineering or a specialty tool. They haven't been delivering something like a software manifest before. And so this idea of having to now talk about all the pieces that comprise your commercial software is pretty new to some of these teams. Not a bad thing. That's just where we are right now. So working with them on how do we do this in a way that we don't, again, go down this like anti-DevOps route where we're piling on so many requirements. It's too expensive to do business with DoD. It's too burdensome on our development teams, even the commercial development teams. We need to drive this into those automated pipelines, and we need to have agreements on roughly what data we want to capture in these SBOMs so they mean something to folks that make decisions based off of it. But again, being very aggressive that we preserve our flow and how we do deployments and prioritizing that.
Yeah, that's always the challenge I see, right? A lot of teams are starting. You've seen the OMB memo on the new put on the supply chain, right? And they already see some overreaction, right? People start saying, CISA has to prepare a report or guidance. I forgot how they phrased it on the open source risk, right? If there's no risk on commercial software, right, which does not have open source bit in it whatsoever. And so what do you see? I remember we had quite a few struggle also with open source software on your side of the house. What's the latest when it comes to fear of open source? What do you tell people that are worried about open software and provenance and China and actor and people seeing the code and all this craziness?
Yeah, absolutely. So open source software it's it's not always free, right? We have to remember that it is like any technology, it is part of a strategy that includes investments to make that technology suitable for however you're operating it. You need to increase the resiliency, the security posture, et cetera. It's just, yet another thing that has those considerations. Some of the neat things about it, though, is it provides you incredible transparency that commercial tools don't necessarily provide when they're closed source. Even binary source analysis, it can get you so far, but it's not nearly as good as having source. And so once you start to work more with the open source community, you get that transparency, you get access to the developers, you get more ability to interact with that product as it's evolving over time. But again, you do have to take a lot of consideration into where is that software being used ultimately, how resilient and how reliable does it need to be? Is there special security considerations? And then there are definitely ways that you can build investment strategies and techniques to accommodate that. And overall, I've seen it as a strong benefit for teams to embrace the flexibility that you gain with OSS. Just again, being mindful that it is something that will forever be part of your system, and you have to manage it like you do every other piece of your system.
Yeah. And what do you pay attention when you look at open source projects? What do you think about? What kind of key criteria you look at? How many contributors? The scales. What do you look at when you look at open source projects? Just I can still engage in. It's not too small or it's stable. You look at maybe the scanning. What kind of cyber things that they're doing on their GitHub repos. What do you think about when you look at open source projects?
Hey, Nick, you came across pretty garbled for me. Could you try one more time?
Yes, I think we still have so many issues with streaming.
Your mic's pretty quiet too for me.
Let me type it. I'm going to type it.
There we go. Okay. Yes. Okay. So definitely important, like I mentioned, that when you pull down one of these components, you have to think about all of the aspects of that component and how it's going to be used on the system, and then adjust your investments around that. So when you pull in an open source project, you need to make sure it's not a dead project. If it's going to be in a system that's going to be around for a long time, picking a more popular project is definitely attractive there. The other nice thing about that is you'll see there's a lot more investment in that project. So if it's used by the financial sector, for example, there's probably a significant amount of security investment that you're getting by consuming that open source package. So definitely pay attention to how it's being used, its popularity, especially in recent times. The other advantage of this too, from a security perspective, is that if it's very popular, it opens up or reduces your chance, I should say, of hijack type attacks, people taking over the repositories. So yeah, it's popular is definitely a great way to look at it.
So sorry, I don't know what's going on this. Yeah, I've been in the chat with StreamYard for the last 30 minutes telling them they need to fix their servers, and they have an issue, and it's just what it is, So can you hear me now? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, you're all good.
It goes.
Yeah.
All right. So all right. So I heard your answer on the GitHub stuff. You obviously you mentioned the sustainment of that, right? And how do you feel about provenance of the development teams, right? A lot of people realize that big open source projects have developers from China and Russia. Is that a showstopper? The minute there's a contributor on an open source project from China, is that the end of the world? What do we do?
Yeah. So again, zooming out a bit, it really depends on the type of system you're deploying and its mission requirements. If it is an automated toaster oven and information system that just shows innocuous data, something like that, you can accept quite a bit more risk. You may not need to invest in hardening techniques very much for that case if we can show that even if it's compromised, it doesn't have a blast radius that would impact something sensitive. Now, if you're developing something that's very critical and very sensitive, then you definitely need to look at all of that. what investments are being made against that technology, and then how can you harden or the various techniques that are out there to reduce the blast radius of that impacted technology. So yeah, it's all about understanding again what is the software doing or the component doing in your end item, and then being smart with system security engineering to make sure that that's mitigated to a risk level that's acceptable by your mission operators.
Well, when you start looking at some of the big projects, right, including Kubernetes and Harbor and many of the big DNC projects, you're gonna find obviously contributions from all over the world. Would we argue that because of number of lines in code, we're in good shape to trust it, at least to know what's going on? Or is kind of the volume of adopters and contributors helps
Yeah,
there?
sure. Can we write a system? Right. Can we write a system that is only based on U.S. personnel? Yes. It would be incredibly expensive, and it would probably be pretty limited in feature sets. But yeah, that could be an approach that teams take. Now, a lot of teams operate Microsoft Windows, they operate Kubernetes, they operate these technologies that have a global impact from their supply chain. And so it goes back again to that risk discussion. Understanding open source is great because you have visibility. SBOM is great because now we start to have visibility over time to these commercial products. And it turns out that we are very much a global community. Contributions are coming in from everywhere for most popular software packages. So working with your system security engineering team, just bring intent to understand this technology that you're talking about, the risk level that's acceptable for your area, and then making those appropriate investments.
That's spot on. Well, we're gonna have a last word for you. We have only 3 minutes. I'm sorry for people with the issue with StreamYard. That's the first time it happens, but any platform issue. So the beauty of StreamYard allows us to stream to YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter all at the same time. But I guess sometimes it does. That's what it is. So apologize for the audio issues, but I know that we could hear Cal with the most part. No one cares about me, so that's good. So Cal, before we let you go, I wanted to thank you for joining the show too. I wanted to give you the chance before I'm going to tell people who the next guest, okay? But before that, after that, I'm going to let you give last choosing Ken Jones, the head of cybersecurity for the for Quantum. I don't know if I can say it. It's a quantum proof product. So we're going to talk about quantum security and all the fear and is it a boogeyman? What is it? What is quantum? Why do we care? What's going to be scary about this? So it's kind of fun. Lot of issues you've seen in NIST releasing a set of quantum proof algorithm, and the next day one got hacked already. So that's actually people need to pay attention to this stuff. So we're really excited to have Dan join us next Tuesday. I wanted to thank Cal again. I think this session was awesome. Looking into some of the challenges with software-defined webs. A lot of great questions from the audience. But Cal, over to you when it comes to the last words.
Great. I'll just say it's a really exciting time to be in software, and I hope everybody is just as excited as I am. That said, we are in exponential times. So out of any time, it's really important that we reach across industry, commercial boundaries, and put our shoulders into it to make sure that we're evolving these systems at the pace that they need to. Our government is very much open to feedback. We want to partner, and we're excited to work with industry team as we evolve our national defense. So again, thanks, Nick, for this opportunity. This is a lot of fun. I'm happy to have folks reach out to me. And we'll go from there. But thank you again.
Yes, thanks everybody. And reach out to Cal on LinkedIn.